Once it's even into all the corners, you can see it's really not very thick at all, about a quarter of an inch thick. We'll stick it in the oven, 350 degrees for about half an hour. It's very important with this that you cook it until it's just done, because this brownie, as thin as it is, can get very hard and crisp very quickly. So we'll cook it until it's just done. Okay. For the brownie, we'll be cutting both a top and a bottom layer, and we'll be sandwiching white chocolate ice cream in the middle. So we'll let this be our top layer.
Ganache coats the top.
And it's easiest to do this with a nice heavy pour and let all the excess chocolate drip over the edge and make sure you have a nice even coating.
Refrigerate to set up.
And for the bottom, we'll cut the same size round, but then seeing as our filling for the moon pie is made from ice cream, we need some place for the melted ice cream to go as it's on its way to the table. So to stabilize the ice cream, we cut a little hole in the middle, create a chocolate donut.
Served with the brownie is Italian meringue, which is started by beating egg whites to medium peaks and adding sugar.
Sugar to form a common meringue. And once that gets to medium, we'll let it rest there. We have a sugar syrup here that is coming up to 250 degrees. What we have here is the 250 degree syrup. What you want to do is pour the syrup into the meringue in stages, stopping each time so that you don't fling the hot syrup on yourself or on the mixer. It also allows the egg white mixture to temper itself and slowly come up to a hotter temperature rather than doing so quickly. You'll notice that the heat from the syrup is increasing the volume of our meringue.
After all the syrup is added, the beater is put on low speed until the meringue has cooled.
And instead of the marshmallow filling of the typical moon pie, we've got a rich white chocolate ice cream. We'll take our ganache-coated brownie, some strawberry puree made from fresh strawberries, orange juice, a little dark rum, and triple sec, just as a contrast to cut some of the obvious sugary sweetness to this dessert. In the last step, is to take our Italian meringue. Here's where we really pick up the flavor of marshmallow. Take a blowtorch and we'll brown lightly like a toasted marshmallow the outside of the dessert. And there is our Uptown Moon Pie with strawberry puree and rich pistachio brownie.
Welcome to Great Chefs, a culinary tour of the United States featuring some of the country's finest chefs.
The appetizer this time is prepared by Tamara Murphy, executive chef at Campagne in Seattle. It stars Northwest seafood in a Provençal fish soup with roux. Fish is also central to the entree cooked by Roland Liccioni at the famed Le Francais in Wheeling, Illinois. It is dorade, a type of bream, served with a remarkable béarnaise sauce. Dessert is presented at Vincenzo's in Louisville, Kentucky. The culinary essence of the restaurant is Italian, and in that vein, pastry chef Jay Whiteloff prepares cannoli. Tamara Murphy, a North Carolina native, began working in restaurants at 16. In 1988, she came to Seattle, and over the next decade garnered an armful of awards, including Best Chef Northwest from the Beard Society in 1992. Her starter is fish soup with roux, often a garnish with bouillabaisse.
Okay, for the roux, in the blender, 1 egg, and a little bit of garlic, mustard, and 1 red pepper that's been roasted on the grill or in the oven and the skin taken off. Gonna puree. Thank you. And slowly add the olive oil. A little pinch of salt, pinch of pepper. And a drop of lemon juice. I start with fish stock. And for the fish stock, I take a couple pounds of bones, cold water, and leeks, onions, bay leaf, peppercorns, and simmer that for about 20 minutes and then strain it off. Then from that, I make an enriched fish broth. I heat the fish stock up, and I add a pinch of saffron. And then I add some julienne of fennel. And I'm basically blanching everything in my broth. And diced leeks. And I'm going to add a drop of lemon juice. And I'm going to let that simmer for a couple of minutes. So for the fish that I'm using for the soup is seasonal, and you should feel free to use whatever is the freshest and looks the best at your fish market. Here I'm using smelt from the Columbia River. These are farm-raised crayfish. I have scallop, salmon, Penn Cove mussels, and clams from the area as well.
The smelt is coated with semolina and sautéed.
Okay, so I'm going to fry the smelt. Low heat. I put the larger pieces in first. In this case, it would be the scallop. And also, in my fish broth, medium saute will work too. I'm going to add the fresh herbs.
Tarragon, chives, chervil, and parsley.
Salmon, crayfish, and I'm going to pop a lid on that. When the fish is almost ready, which it doesn't take very long, depending on the thickness of your fish, probably 4 to 5 minutes in the broth. Okay. Okay. So the fish soup is garnished with a baked crouton. You can either bake it in the oven with a little olive oil, or you can put it on the grill. And that's what is the roux garnishes the crostini, the crouton. Okay, now plating. Just going to I'm going to keep this warm while I finish my sauce. I'm going to pop it in. And I want to finish my sauce with my vegetables. Here I have some asparagus, some baby squash, some haricot vert. And again, you can use whatever looks good, whatever's in season. They've already been blanched off. I'm going to add a little butter, a little salt, a little pepper. I'm also going to put my crouton in the oven and heat that up. And taste for seasoning. Right. Thank you. Okay. Place my vegetables. I like the presentation on this is important. You want to show off your fish. Roux, can garnish it.
Roland Liccione with his wife Mary Beth owned Le Francais, northwest of Chicago. 1997 was a very good year. He won Best Chef Midwest from the Beard Society, and his restaurant was named one of America's top tables in Gourmet Magazine's Reader's Poll. Here's one reason: sautéed dorade with béarnaise sauce.
I'm going to make a béarnaise eggless sauce, which means I was ready to think about this kind of sauce, because usually the classic béarnaise is made with the egg yolk and monté with like hollandaise and clarified butter. So I kept with the idea to put some yellow curry tomato. So I'm going to show you how to do it. I have some tarragon vinegar here. And some chopped shallot here. So I'm going to reduce.
This is reduced to a syrup.
So in the meantime, I have some porcini mushroom here, fresh porcini mushroom. I'm going to slice them. Keep an eye on the reduction also. The torching mushroom I'm going to saute on the pan here with a little bit of olive oil. So marination is almost ready here. And I'm going to add the yellow curry tomato.
The puree contains 4 yellow tomatoes that were processed and strained.
And I'm going to bring back to boil. Okay, now the sauce is boiling here. What I'm going to do, I'm going to add some fresh butter. 2 teaspoons. And then I'm going to keep stirring for to cool on the sauce.
The 1½ tablespoons of butter is substantially less than the classic béarnaise contains.
One more teaspoon, and that be the end for the sauce. So one good thing on this sauce is it tastes like béarnaise, but there's not too much butter and there's no eggs. So the sauce is very light. So the sauce is ready. What I will do at the end, I will add some fresh tarragon chopped.
A dorade filet is scored before sautéing.
Seasoning on both sides.
It's seared in olive oil.
And the pan has to be very, very hot. So you have to sear on the side of the skin here. And then with the spatula, you make sure you press very firmly.
The chef presses fairly hard with a spatula in order to ensure crispness on the skin side.
So you have to make sure you give a nice brown color on the skin. Okay, when you do like this, now I'm going to put in the oven for like 3 or 4 minutes.
At 450 degrees.
In the meantime, I'm going to finish my garnish for the fish. And I have some French beans here, it's been already cooked. I'm going to pull with the seb mushroom here. So now I can season it a little bit. And a bit chopped shallot. For the béarnaise, I'm going to add some chopped tarragon, fresh tarragon, to finish the sauce.
The great chef's crew can attest that this indeed tastes like béarnaise.
Some few mushroom bread and the green beans. Talking up. Okay. So now my fish is almost ready. I'm going to flip over the pan. Now for the final touch. Tarragon, and have some few red currant tomato here.
Vincenzo's is a big upscale Italian restaurant in Louisville and offers a full range of genuine items, like the dessert prepared here by pastry chef Jay Whiteloff. After culinary school, he worked at a Louisville hotel and private club before joining Vincenzo's. He prepares cannoli with zabaglione.
What we started to make the cannoli filling, we start with 8 ounces of ricotta cheese, and what we have to do to the ricotta is sift it through this fine strainer to get all the grit out, because ricotta is kind of gritty. What you want to do is just sift it. It's a real tedious process, but the finishing the product is a lot better this way. Just work it until it's all through. Right. After you got that strained, you add 1 tablespoon of chocolate chips, 1 tablespoon of candied fruit, and it could be oranges, cherries, whatever they've got available, and about 6 ounces of sugar. I'm going to mix that really good. So it's all nice and mixed. All right, and here we have the cannoli shells. You can buy these in any specialty store, or you can make them. The recipe will be presented at the end of the show. And you just take the knife, take a little bit more, fill it all the way in, smooth out the edge, fill it all the way to the middle.
Incidentally, the recipe for the cannoli shells will not appear at the end of the show. They are often available at bakeries.
Make sure you get a variety of the fruit and chips in there with it. And I clean them up. All right, now for the sauce. We got a double boiler here. We got our wire whip. It's best to use a wire whip to get the air bubbles in it. That's the key to the zabaione. and just whip. You want to keep whipping until when you pull the spoon up, you'll see it lay on, the sauce will lay on top of itself. It won't all sink down. You'll see what you pulled up. It's best to keep going in the same motion, in the same circle. You get your best results. You get more air into it that way.
The classic Zabaglione sauce is often flavored with Marsala wine.
You pull it up, it's almost laying on top. What we'll do is ladle some of the sauce on the plate. Spread it around. Spread the Zabillon on there. We'll do the cannolis is a little powdered sugar. Place them on the plate. Garnish with a little orange rind here. And a few raspberries. There you go. Very simple, classic Italian dessert. Cannolis, the Zabillon sauce.
Welcome to Great Chefs, a culinary tour of the United States featuring some of the country's finest chefs.
The first course is prepared by Rick Bayless, whose Chicago restaurants offer bona fide Mexican cuisine. You can't get more authentic than the chef's corn tamales. From Jackson, Mississippi, Chef Nick Apostle cooks an entree that in the South is a seasonal delicacy, soft-shell crawfish served with a tarragon chive butter sauce. Finally, from the Ritz-Carlton at Amelia Island, Florida, pastry chef Kevin Box offers dessert. It's a goat cheese tart featuring a cornmeal sweet dough with citrus confit. Rick Bayless, like a number of young American chefs, achieved national recognition with triangulation by opening multiple restaurants and publishing a cookbook. In 1995, he won the prestigious Chef of the Year award from the Beard Society. From his Frontera grill, here are corn tamales.
Making of fresh corn tamales is always a very special thing in Mexico and all through the Southwest, because when that first harvest of the fresh corn comes out, when the kernels are still really moist and they haven't begun to dry, that's when everyone wants to make the fresh corn tamales. Now in Mexico, that would be done with field corn, but here in the United States we have the sweet corn to work with, which isn't nearly as starchy. But you would treat them both the same way when you were starting out the preparations here, and that would be to cut the base right basically where the cob starts and start peeling off some of these outer husks, because we could use these actually to wrap the tamales a little later on in this process of making fresh corn tamales. And once these have been taken off, you can see that if they're not coming off really easily, maybe we haven't made our cut quite at the right spot, so we can tear off the last bit here. And we're going to try to get all of the corn silk with it, as much of it as possible, and just leave that lying right there. Clean off as much silk. We don't want that to get into the finished tamales. And then cut, standing it up like this, cut the kernels right off the cob. And this is going to form the base of our mixture that we make these out of. It's not everything that goes in, and in fact, since we're making these with sweet corn, I follow a tradition that I discovered in southern Mexico a great number of years ago about making the sweet corn tamales, that if your corn doesn't have quite enough starch in it, and this sweet corn never will, that we would make this dish with half sweet corn. I've got the kernels cut from 2 cobs here. We would make it with half sweet corn that's been ground, and I'll show you that doesn't take very long in the food processor. Just get a coarse puree going out of that sweet corn, and then the other half of the mixture is going to be masa. Now this is masa that made from the field corn, but once it's been dried and then cooked with slaked lime and then ground through stone grinders, this is the same mixture, the same dough that's used for making corn tortillas, except in this case it's just a little bit coarser ground than what would be used for making the tortillas. It's a special kind of masa, they call this mixture, masa for tamales. So we're going to mix that in with the fresh corn. But the rest of the ingredients are butter and a really rich flavored pork lard that we buy from a local Mexican grocer. Now, if you don't want to use that, it's not absolutely necessary for the sweet corn tamales as it is for the other savory tamales. You could use Crisco or some sort of vegetable shortening, or just an additional amount of butter in the same proportion. And then I have 3 ingredients mixed together. It's a small amount of baking powder, salt, and sugar, and that will go in with the remainder of those ingredients. And we're going to turn this on, and it needs to puree or mix, or I'm pulsing it just to get it started, get an even mixture going here. But it needs to now go for about a minute.
The mixture will be cooked in a banana leaf which the chef warms over an open flame.
And now it's time to prepare the leaves that we're going to wrap these in before we put them into the steamer. Now I said you could use the fresh corn husks for this. These would need to be lightly blanched if you find that they're curling up on you like these are. But I thought it'd be fun to show the use of the banana leaves, because those are used extensively in southern Mexico and all along that east coast, Veracruz, and down into Tabasco and Chiapas. And I'm putting these over a flame. You could also steam them if working over the open flame is not your thing. But I'm just lightly toasting it, and you'll notice a real change in the color of the leaf as all of the oils come to the surface, and it makes the leaf much, much, much more pliable. Now these leaves are usually purchased in frozen state in the United States, most of them coming from the Philippines. But you can also find them occasionally fresh. Those have to be cooked for sure. Steaming them, maybe 20 minutes will be enough time to soften them up the same way. Now, these can be filled or done solo, as we're doing today, without a filling. Meat filling is typical shredded pork cooked with a little of the smoky chipotle chilies. Put a little bit of it in the center of your banana leaf. Fold it over one side, fold it over the other, and then top and bottom. Now, they could go into your steamer just like that, or to ensure that they're not going to come apart, they can be flipped around and tied up with a string like a package.
The tamales are steamed in a single layer.
Plate, a small plate, and you could also do this for grand buffet style too. It makes a beautiful presentation with these exotic banana leaves and so forth. You can see how they have come away from, they're not sticking at all to the leaf. That's the first indication that they're done. They take about an hour in the steamer, and you can see I'm just kind of rolling and folding those leaves up around the base and serve them right in that packet. People are always asking if that's something that's to be eaten or not, and it is not. It's just their wrapper that they come steamed in. And there's several different toppings you could put. Your favorite salsa could go on there, as I'm doing here, a little dollop of this homemade sour cream. And I always like to do something that's fresh on them as well. Some sprigs of cilantro or a little bit of chopped raw onion, white onion, tangy, strong white onion is always a nice accompaniment too. And they have a slightly sweet taste, and they have a real elemental earthiness about them that I think goes very nicely balanced with that creaminess, that slightly soured cream, and the fresh cilantro.
Chef Nick Apostle is owner or part owner in 4 Mississippi restaurants, including his namesake operation in Jackson. In 1997, he was invited to join chefs from all 7 American rice-producing states in the Washington Rice Celebration at the nation's capital. His entree is soft-shell crawfish with a butter sauce.
Soft-shell crawfish are a true delicacy. These crawfish come from Bogalusa, Louisiana. They are soft-shelled. These crawfish are frozen and have been thawed out. A crawfish will molt, and then the shell will harden within 24 hours after he's molted. So these have to be harvested, and then these are put in gallon plastic baggies and frozen in water. All the features, these soft shells come completely intact with all their features. In order to prepare the soft shell crawfish for this dish, you merely lay your crawfish down. You want to protect the features. The claws are probably one of the most important part of that. You put your hand to each side of the head of the crawfish, and you can feel 2 little knots. These are calcium deposits. What you want to do is bring your knife right behind the eye of the crawfish and just push down forward to go ahead and break the face of the crawfish off, and then merely squeeze these calcium deposits. Take your knife and just push them right out. Everything else about this crawfish is edible. The fat from the crawfish is still in the head, which is considered a true delicacy.
The crawfish will be coated with a seasoned flour and egg wash. It contains salt, black, white, and cayenne pepper, onion powder, paprika, garlic powder, thyme, and oregano.
Place it into the seasoned flour. Make sure you coat the crawfish thoroughly with the flour, because that's your base for your breading. Shake off the excess. Be gentle so you don't lose any of your appendages. Okay. Now we're going to go back in the seasoned flour. Make sure you separate all the little appendages, so when you drop it in the grease, the hot grease, it's not going to just come out as a glob. Lay them in the grease. All they need is just about a minute or two.
The crawfish are served with a savory beurre blanc flavored with white wine, fish stock, balsamic vinegar, chives, and tarragon.
Take some sauce, pour it onto a warm plate. Just spread your butter sauce all the way across the bottom. Take your soft shell crawfish. Present them as such. But this is it. It's a mouthful.
At the time of taping, the pastry chef at the snazzy Ritz-Carlton at Amelia Island was Kevin Box. He has since moved to the Ritz-Carlton on St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands. His dessert is a cornmeal sweet dough tart filled with goat cheese and served with a lavender citrus confit.
First, we're doing a cornmeal sweet dough. We add the dry ingredients together in a large bowl with cornmeal, all-purpose flour, 6 tablespoons of sugar, and we have 1.5 teaspoons of salt and 3 teaspoons of baking powder, which I added together. I'm going to mix the dried ingredients together and combine them.
There are 1.5 cups each cornmeal and all-purpose flour.
Then we have 4.5 ounces of cold butter cubed up. I'm going to add that. And I like to cut it in with my fingers so I can feel it. And you can use a pastry cutter or a fork if you like. But you want to go into almost like a flat piece, just cut it in, and you want to break it up into little pieces. Once you got the butter distributed evenly, you make a well and add 1 cup of cream.
When the dough just begins to come together, it's moved to a work surface.
It's going to seem like a fairly dry dough, but don't worry about that.
When combining the dough, guard against overworking it. Chill for an hour before proceeding.
I'm going to make the dough flat as possible before you even pick up your pen. A little flour. And for this recipe, I'm using a small tartlet shell. You could use a 10-inch shell if you like. Cut it out with a pastry cutter.
Freeze the shells, then pre-bake at 350 degrees until the edges are golden brown.
And I like cutting this dough. This dough is, it shrinks a little bit. It won't shrink that much. I like cutting the dough larger than my tart shell. So I could put this in, then form it almost like a flower or a napkin into a container.
Meanwhile, the filling is started with 20 ounces of soft goat cheese.
Okay, and now for the filling, I'm using a fresh goat cheese curd. It comes in a tub. It's a little bit softer than the raw goat cheese that you buy at a store. And you want to do this like a cheesecake, like cream cheese. You're going to cream the goat cheese with the butter. It's 4 tablespoons softened butter with the sugar.
Using the paddle attachment, the cheese, butter, and sugar are combined. Then 4 whole eggs and a tablespoon of flour are added.
Then you add your eggs one at a time. After the eggs are combined, you stop your mixture. Scrape down the sides of the bowl. And there you have it. Smooth, no lumps. You take your pre-baked shell and spoon the filling into the shell. And bake just until set.
The chef prepares a citrus confit.
We start with the zest of 4 oranges and 6 lemons. And we segment the fruit as well. So with 1/2 cups of water, 1 cup of sugar, your zest. And I'm using fresh lavender. And the part I'm chopping is the lavender leaves. Take that, 2 teaspoons of fresh lavender.
The aromatic herb lavender is a member of the mint family and is often used in making tea.
And once it reduced to almost like a jam-like consistency, you want to add your segments of fruit. And what you come up with is a candied zest with the herbs and the segmented fruit. You cook it after you add these segments. You cook it for 3 minutes. You don't want to break up the segments that much. When the tart is baked, just until firm to the touch. You cool it down, and it pops right out of the shell.
An interesting marinade for sliced strawberries includes sugar, ground pepper, chopped lavender, and vodka.
The vodka and the pepper reacts to bring out the flavor of the berries and just to enhance the flavor.
Let's stand for 30 minutes.
I like to garnish the plate with powdered sugar. Fresh blackberries.
Finally, aged Portuguese goat cheese.
Welcome to Great Chefs, a culinary tour of the United States featuring some of the country's finest chefs.
Leading off this time is Frank Lee from slightly north of Broad in Charleston, South Carolina. His appetizer features shiitake mushrooms stuffed with a foie gras chicken mousse. From San Francisco, Gary Danko prepares an entree featuring salmon wrapped in spinach and flavored with a Moroccan-style marinade. Note his technique in forming medallions. Dessert is offered from Goodfellows Restaurant in Minneapolis. Pastry chef Alan Sayers prepares a chilled summer fruit soup served with sesame brittle ice cream. Frank Lee, executive chef at slightly north of Broad in Charleston, exhibits a good old boy demeanor that belies a complicated culinary philosophy that almost approaches mysticism. He dips deeply into South Carolina local product with his appetizer, shiitake mushrooms stuffed with a chicken foie gras mousse.
What we're going to take is 12 ounces of chicken breast and 7 ounces of the foie gras to make it very rich. We're going to salt it, cut it into little pieces, salt it, puree it, add in our cream, and make the mousse. It's important that you first cut the chicken into little pieces so it'll grind up easy in the robo-coupe and not have any of the ligaments giving you any problems later. Now we put all this in, and And we salt it before we grind it, and that's important because you have to, the salt helps break down the tissues in the chicken and it makes the cream easier to hold. For this amount of chicken, we're going to use right at a teaspoon of salt, maybe just a touch more. Mix it up well. Put it in my wife's Cuisinart. We'll do about half at a time. I like to keep the chicken and the mousse on ice. But if it's hot in your kitchen, you don't want the mousse to get hot. And we'll just puree it a little bit at a time. We've got the mousse now chilling on the ice. For me, I've done it so often, I'll just put the cream right into the RoboCoupe or the Cuisinart and pulse it down. But when you first start out, it's best to mix it in a little bit of time by hand, and you get a better feel for it. Put in about half my cream, and we'll slowly work it in. Kind of chop it in. This is where having added the salt in beforehand comes into play. It helps break down the tissues in the chicken and the foie gras and makes it easier to incorporate the cream.
The heavy cream is added in 2 steps.
We put this mousse into the mushroom caps because we want to feature our local mushroom growers' wonderful product, but it's also excellent in a little tart. You do a pastry shell and layer it with artichokes or celery root or anything you want, asparagus, and put a little pastry lid on it and bake it in the oven. Makes an excellent tart for a hors d'oeuvre party. When you get real fancy, you can stuff it into squash blossoms or roll it in bok choy or romaine lettuce and poach it off and serve it with all sorts of things.
For the port wine sauce, the chef will use beef stock.
I'm going to start with a little bit of balsamic vinegar, about 2 ounces. Reduce that down very quickly. Add in about 4 ounces of some good port. And that was quite a rush there. You don't want to burn the port or the vinegar, but you want to burn off most of the alcohol. Again, with anything else, you start with good ingredients, you'll have a better tasting product. The port we used was a good quality port, and that makes a difference. There's no big secret to making sauces. It's starting with good ingredients, starting from A, working your way to Z. It's called mise en place. You have to have everything in place. When you do, it's quick and easy, and that's what we do in the restaurant, is take things just to the moment when we can finish them. So this is how it would be in the restaurant just before service. We would finish up our sauces, and we have their stocks ready to go, reduced to the right consistency, so you can fly. I'm going to add in about 2 cups. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, or maybe it's 4 cups. We'll give it 1 more. And we're going to reduce that down till it tastes good. Very easy. We'll just fill the mushrooms up. This dish has been a real pleasure for us, but the more people ate it, the more they talked about it, And it's a way that I can offer my clientele a foie gras taste without charging them $25. And that's, that's another thing. You want to take care of your guests. You're just not here to take their money. You're here to nurture them, to entertain them, to take care of them. And and part of that is trying to bring the best things you can to the table in the best manner at the best price.
The mushrooms are browned in butter.
Everything in moderation. We're going to get these going on top of the stove. I'm going to put them in the oven and finish them. I don't like to flip them over until they're just coming out because I don't like to brown the mousse. I want to keep it nice and tender. It's at this point, this is the point where we'd be in the restaurant at service time. We'd have our sauce just finished. We'd have our mushrooms already stuffed. All we have to do is cook it off, saute the spinach, maybe whip the sauce with a little bit of butter. Bing, bang, boom. You're good to go.